Good morning, everybody. My name is Greg. I am a principal here at Collectiv. We're excited that you all have joined us today with the one and only Jessica Jolly, who's going to show us a great presentation today.
Hello, my name is Jessica Jolly. I normally live right outside of Chicago, but I have been during the pandemic. I have been spending it in Western Maine, so it's been lovely to be here. So, a crash course in Power BI, you need to understand the full ecosystem. So, in the middle is the yellow box, which is the Power BI desktop. And that's a tool that a lot of people start with, number one, because it's free and you can download it and you can get started. It's easy to access, it's easy to start using. Within the Power BI desktop, there is a tool, an embedded tool called the Power Query Editor. And that's the tool in the green box. Power Query Editor is the tool that's going to allow you to alter your data, edit your data, transform your data, and make it fit for purpose. So the part that I talked about a minute ago with prepping your data, that all has to do with the Power Query Editor. So the central yellow box, Power BI Desktop, is where you're going to create your reports. You can create reports in the service, but best practice is for you to go ahead and author your reports in the Power BI Desktop. And you clean and prep your data in the green box in the Power Query Editor. Once you've got a report that's ready for prime time, you publish that report and into the Power BI service, and that's the white box. The white box is actually divided into two areas. One is called My Workspace, which we really won't be talking about today. You should consider that as a sandbox area for you to experiment and play. The other area is just called Workspaces. And Workspaces are collaborative areas where you and other people in your organization can look at reports, create dashboards, share data sets. In other words, just what it sounds like. It's a place for you all to come together and work on data together. Finally, each workspace can have an associated app. So when I say app here, I don't really mean the phone app per se. I mean almost like a package of content that has been bundled up and put together and can be published out to a wide audience in the organization. So we're going to talk about workspaces, we're going to talk about the service, and we'll be talking about the Power Query Editor, and we'll talk about the desktop. So these are the 3.5, I'm going to call the app a half component. These are the 3.5 big components in Power BI, and they all work together. So you can't really separate one from the other and have an effective Power BI implementation. Let's get started on prepping your data. The first thing I want to talk about is a perfect world. So we all know we live in a perfect world, right? For sure, it's absolutely perfect. And that means that you have perfect, clean, fit for purpose data coming from your source. That means that in your databases, in your systems, there are no misspellings, there's no inconsistencies, there's no missing data. And if you were not on mute, I'm pretty sure by this point you'd be laughing at me. So we all know that that doesn't happen often. It's an ideal, we can strive for it, but it doesn't happen often. So the next best thing is that you are able to clean the data at the source, meaning that you take the time, that you have the access, that you have the permissions to be able to go into whatever source it is you're using, and that you can clean up the misspellings, you can clean up the blank rows, you can clean up the inconsistencies in the way things are worded. Now, although that's not as rare as a perfect world scenario, it's still pretty rare. Most people are not going to be able to get access to the source data to be able to clean it up. You may be able to implement a project to go back to the source data and clean that up. But generally speaking, you get what you get when you bring in the data from your sources. So in the real world, we use Power Query Editor to be able to clean and scrub your data. So what I'm going to do now, I want to bring you guys into the Power BI desktop. For now, I just want to start from a blank one. So I'm just going to go to File, and I'm going to create a new Power BI desktop. So again, I just hit File, and over here, my cursor's in the upper left-hand corner. I'm going to hit New. And this is going to, just like any other Microsoft tool, this is going to open up a blank new file. So let's give it a second to bring that up. And once it's done that, we will, there we go. So our first step is to go ahead and get some data. So right now I'm looking at a blank screen here. I have no data in here. I have to go get data. So I'm gonna bring my cursor to the upper left-hand side of my ribbon. I'm gonna zoom in here just so you guys can see where I'm at. And I'm gonna just open up Get Data really quickly so that you can see all the different options that are available to you. If I were to hit More right here, if I go and hit More, I'm going to get a whole big long list of things. I encourage you to explore these options on your own so that you can see what is available. In the interest of time, I'm going to just strictly go with Excel because, again, we're streamlining this for the purposes of this crash course. And I'll hit Excel. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go out and find an Excel file. Now I've pre-prepped it and put it right here so it's easy to find and so on. So now what you're looking at right here, okay, what you're looking at right here, this is a list of the worksheets that are in that Excel file, okay? Nothing magic there. Those are just the worksheets that are available in that file. And I'm just going to select all of them. And you'll notice that it's previewing over on the right-hand side. That is not a full view of the data. That's just a preview to make sure that I actually brought in the right thing. And now down here in this corner, I have two options. You can see that I can load the data directly into the data model, or I can hit Transform Data, and that's going to take me into the Power Query Editor. So I'm going to hit Transform Data, and now it's going to open up a new window. So this is something that's very confusing to people when they first start out with Power BI, is, you know, getting a sense of where you are in the Power BI ecosystem. That's why I always start out with that diagram to show people. So when you are first starting out, you might go, whoa, I'm confused. Am I actually in Power BI? I'm in the Power Query Editor. Where am I? So I always tell everybody, always look up here in the upper left-hand corner, and you can see where it says Power Query Editor here. So if you're not comfortable, if you feel a little lost, go up to that left-hand side. Now down here on the left-hand panel, you will see all of the worksheets that we brought in. Okay, now again, nothing magic here. These are just worksheets in Excel. Here, now that they are in the Power Query Editor, and from here on forward, these are going to be called queries. So one thing that you do have to kind of shift from when you start getting into Power BI is realizing that Power BI was born in the database world. So they use database terminology. And for me personally, that was a very difficult transition initially. So these are just the same old worksheets that you that were in the Excel file. Okay, they just are called queries now. And I am going to go in and I'm going to just make a few changes. I'm going to go to the customers query. So I'm just going to click on it. So my cursor just was hovering over customers and I clicked once. And now in the middle window, you can see the data that was in that worksheet. It's now over here in this query. Now, what you cannot do is just double click into these and start editing. That doesn't work that way. We're going to use the ribbon up here to apply commands to the data to shape it the way you want to. So for example, one thing I could do is I could use my scroll bar here at the bottom. So my cursor's all the way at the bottom and I'm using my scroll bar. And I can come across and I can look at the data and I can see that there's some columns in here that I don't really need. So for example, this column right here, I see that it's mostly empty. Okay, and I do get this window down here that gives me a sense of what the data population is in there, so I can get a count, I can tell how many are empty, I can tell how many are distinct, and so on. That's just a window, so I'm going to bring it down and minimize it. But I can go ahead and I can use my ribbon to remove the column, or I can right click. So remember, a lot of the principles that you know about Microsoft tools are still operative here. You can use things on the ribbon, or you can right click, whatever you prefer. In this case, I'm going to keep it super simple, and I'm just going to do a remove columns, and that's going to remove that column. What I want to draw your attention to is that over here on the right-hand side of the window, we now have this box here called Applied Steps. And notice that this is now recording the step that I took. This is the magic, folks. This is it. This is the secret sauce. This is the reason you want to investigate and really take advantage of Power Query Editor. What it does is it records every step you take. So if you're thinking about songs, you could think about that really weird Sting song, every move you make. It's recording every step you take. But here's the beautiful thing. If you update that file and you bring it in again, or you just refresh it right here, you don't have to do all that work again. I'm going to say that again for you guys. You don't have to do that work again. It's already mapped out step by step. So you do the transformations, the changes on your data once, and as long as the file stays and when it's brought in has the same exact structure, your work is done. No more doing this repetitively. So again, Power Query Editor will well repay the work you put into learning it. And I will say, by the way, guys, it's also available in Excel 2016. So you can use it over there as well. Notice that here at the top, my column names are useless to me. So they just say column 1, column 2, column 3. Well, that's useless. So I need to use my first row, which is right here. I need to take that row and I need to turn it into column headers. Well, that's easy to do. I'm going to come up to my ribbon. I'm all the way over here on the almost to the right, and I'm going to use first row as headers. And I'm just going to click on that, and boom, it's going to promote those header rows, that first row to headers, and it's recorded my step over here. So again, every time I make a change, the step gets recorded. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come all the way over here to the left-hand side, and I'm going to go to close and apply. So what that's going to allow me to do is that is going to allow me to take the changes that I just made, the transformations that I just made, and I am now going to apply them in the data model. I'm also going to close this Power Query Editor window at the same time, just because I don't need it open, because we're not going to, be moving back and forth. But in real life, you will keep this window open, I guarantee it, because the process of cleaning and transforming your data takes a long time usually if you're working with complex data sets. They say that 80% of any data business intelligence project is spent cleaning and prepping the data. I don't know, obviously it's going to vary project to project, but it's still a considerable amount of time. So data modeling in and of itself can be a terrifying term. However, what I'm going to say to you is, if you've ever built a VLOOKUP in an Excel file, you have used principles of data modeling. It's not exactly the same thing. I agree, it's not exactly the same thing. However, the logic and the thought process is the same. The star schema is the star of the show. Then, around the fact table, so think of the fact table sort of a center point of your star. Around the fact table, you're going to have what are called dimension tables. And dimension tables just describe the facts. All of those things that describe the product will live over in the dimension table. As soon as you kind of dig into this a little bit, it'll start to make a whole lot of sense. But just keep that idea of a star schema in your head. Facts are in the center. and descriptions orbit around the outside of the star. The connection between the fact center and the descriptions on the outside are the relationships. Relationships between those tables are the key to functional visuals. And 99% of the time, the problem you're going to run into is because the data model doesn't have the right type of relationship or doesn't even have a relationship where you can use two fields from different tables in the visual. So when I'm teaching a class on Power BI, I always tell people the very first thing you do is you go in and check your data model. So that's what we're going to do really quickly. And I'm going to look at these three icons over here on the left-hand side. So the first icon is the report view. So that's where I look at my visuals. That's where I build my visuals. The second one is the data view, and that's where I can see the data that's present in the tables and the queries that I've imported. Okay, I can see it. This is not the place to make changes at this point, okay? But I can look at it. I can even filter it, but again, this is really more for you to be able to just look at it and try to understand what you're seeing in your visuals. And finally, the most important one, in my opinion, is this modeling view down here. So here we have a picture of a data model. It is not a perfect star, like I told you, it's not a perfect star, but it's gonna do the job here. So I'm going to show you right here. Here are my order details. So this is my fact table right here in the center. Okay, I want you to envision that as the fact table. And because it's storing facts about the orders that have been placed. So this is the the fact table. And then as I connect tables into it, I can use relationships to establish my connections between the fact table and the description table. So now we have a problem here, which is why I always tell everybody the first thing you do when you bring your data in is you come into your data model. See how this customer table right here? So this is that customer's worksheet. It is not connected to anything. Notice how I'm just pulling it around here. It is free floating. And what that means is that if I want to use a field from this table to display information about orders, and we're going to look at these visuals that I've already built out here. So here is a slicer visual. So the slicer visual is just a visual that I drag onto the canvas that allows me to display all the customers. So just in the interest of being able to demonstrate that really quickly, it's not going to be formatted as nicely as this one, but that's okay. I'm going to do it right here so you can see it. I'm in the blank canvas. I've just clicked into the blank canvas area. I go over to my list of visuals. So I'm over here on the right-hand side now, and I'm going to find my slicer visual. Okay, so there's my slicer visual. I'm going to click on it, and that's going to give me an empty shell for a visual right over here. Okay, so that's my empty visual shell. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a field over here from my fields list. So I'm back over here on the right-hand side now. So I'm going to go to my customers table, and I'm going to open it up, and I'm going to drag company name. I'm just going to make this a little bigger so you can see the field name. I'm going to drag company name. So I can just literally pick it up and drag it right onto that visual right there. So there we go. And now you can see how easy that is to create. So I just made this one a little prettier right down here. I just wanted you to see here how you do this. So for the purposes of this, I'm just going to go ahead and remove this one and replace it with the exact same thing right here. So that was how easy it was to create that. But now, okay, now what I want you to see is I can make this as pretty as I want to. It doesn't work. Okay, so I'm going to unselect all. Let me jump in here and do an unselect all. So I've selected nothing now. Okay, now I'm going to go select an individual customer. I'm just going to pick them at random. It doesn't matter. I'm going to pick this individual customer, and guess what? Nothing changes. Nothing happens. Okay, I can pick a different one. Nothing happens. No visual changes. And the reason for that is because I am pulling that field right here. So I'm pulling company name into that visual. I'm using this field, but when I pick a company right here, this is connected to nothing. So there's no way it's going to display any other information from any other visual. So what I need to do now is I need to connect it to something. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find customer ID. So here's my customer ID. So that's the unique numerical number that describes each customer. And I'm going to connect it over here, okay, to this customer ID. But the bottom line is that I need to get this guy connected to this guy. And it's easy. I just drag. Okay, now there's other ways to do it here. There's other ways to get it done. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and just drag it. And you can see now that I have a line between the customers and the orders. And then I have a line from orders down to order details. So that means that I can now see the order details for a particular customer because they are connected. When you get down to root cause, if you have a visual that's not working, the first thing you do is go look at that model. So now notice what happens when I pick a customer. Everything is changing. Okay, so they're all changing here. And that's because there's a connection now. And that means that these visuals can now use the data connections, the relationships to display the appropriate data. Let's talk quickly about DAX. Don't be afraid of it. I would be lying to you if I said it was easy to master. It is not easy to master. I've been spending a year learning DAX, and there is a moment that comes when you go, oh, I get it, okay? But you do need to have some sense of what DAX can do for you, and I want to give you just a super brief introduction to it. Again, these are guideposts for your journey. So DAX is a functional language, just like Excel formulas. What do I mean by that? I mean, it uses functions. So if you've ever written an Excel formula with a sum in it, you know what a functional language is. Okay, so sum, average, divide, all of those things are functions. And DAX uses functions. So that you're already ahead of the game because you're already familiar with that. The syntax is very similar to that in Excel. So it uses parentheses, it uses commas. It is just as picky as Excel. So if you miss a comma, if you don't close your parentheses, it's going to hiss at you just like Excel does. Okay, so if you write a lot of Excel formulas and you're familiar with that, having to be so super careful, then you're going to be fine with this because you'll know to check. That all your commas are there, all your parentheses are closed. Now here's one of the major differences. DAX uses something called the VertiPack engine, okay? And the thing you need to know about the VertiPack engine is that it stores data in columns, okay? So you do not get to the cellular level like you do in Excel. Okay, that is one of the things that people really have to, unhitch themselves from. You are not going down to the cell level when you use DAX. You're going to be working with columns of data. Okay, so that's a really important concept. And that means that DAX acts on columns, total columns, not cells. Okay, so when you're working with DAX and Power BI, forget cells. Okay, cells in Power BI are just a way to display the data. They have no real meaning other than that. And that means because you don't work with cells, that to get to that level of granularity that you're familiar with in Excel, you're going to use something called filter and row context. I've already written some DAX here. So what I've done is I've already written a measure, but I want to, in DAX, but I want to show it to you so that you can, I'm going to take it apart in front of your eyes. So over here on the right-hand side, I'm in the orders details table right here, okay? And what I did not have, if you had the chance to look at that worksheet in Excel, what you would not have seen in the data was anything that told me what the order value was. When you get data that comes in from a source and you need to make some additional calculations on that data in Power BI, that is called creating a measure, okay? So I created a measure, and you can see it here with the little calculator next to it called total order value. So let me zoom out, and I'm going to click on total order value so you can see a measure in the wild here. So up here in my formula bar now, I have a line of DAX. This is a line of DAX, and I want to just take you through it so you see some of the similarities here. So first of all, here is the name of this calculation, the name of this measure. So I've named it something so I can call it and use it. Equals, so that's similar to Excel. And then sum is the function I'm using. And here is the first column. So order details is the table, and then the column is unit price. And then I'm going to multiply, and then I'm going to use another function, sum, and I'm going to, here's the column. I'm going to take orders details, and I'm going to take quantity. So this is taking the unit price column and multiplying it by the orders details quantity column. That's what it's doing, okay? Now, you say to me, well, wait a minute, how am I going to know like at a granular level? Because what this returns is this returns a number all up. So let me make sure all my customers are selected. So I just came over here and did all my customers. I have every customer selected. Now notice that this little visual right here that I created actually has the total order value for all of the customers, 2.9 billion, okay? So that's like, okay, well, wait a minute. I don't want to know it for all the customers. I want to know it for an individual customer. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select an individual customer. And now notice that what it has done is it's given me the total order value for just that customer. And what's happened is I am using what's called a filter context. So I am filtering this measure that I created called total order value. I am filtering it, and I get this value, which is the granularity for just this customer. Now, if I want to take it a little further and I want to show it for the orders for that individual customer, I use them in this visual right here, which is just a table that I created. And now notice that I have all of the orders for that customer, and I have the total order value for that customer for each order. And that's called the row context. So the way DAX works is you get the value for the column, okay? And then you're going to use filters and row context to be able to get down to a granular level. Again, filter and row context are hard concepts to wrap your mind around. So it does take a minute to sort of master or get your mindset. But I promise you, the minute you finally, it tumbles for you when all the little pieces tumble into place, then you go, aha, okay, I understand what's happening. So again, just remember, DAX works at the column level, not at a cell level. Next one up is leverage the power of the service. When I train on Power BI, I hear a lot of people saying, well, most of our people are just going to have free licenses. No, okay. You do need to not rely on the freebie sharing methods. You can email someone a PBIX file. You can put a PBIX file, which is what a report file is called. You can put that in a SharePoint or on a OneDrive. But in terms of sharing and creating a Power BI organization, do not rely on freebie methodology. In the long run, it will not work. And so clarity around what your licensing journey is going to look like is critical to success. So the workspace, if you recall, is the service. So that's the part of Power BI that you access on the web. Workspaces are the primary organizational tool in the service. And a workspace is what I mentioned before. It's the ability for a group of people to come together to share reports, data sets, dashboards, data flows. So it is an area for you all for a selected group of people to collaborate together. You need to spend some time thinking about how will you organize your workspaces. And what I mean by that is you could organize them by topic. And that idea, I freely admit, I'm stealing from Melissa Coates, who is data architecture, Power BI architecture person. She's really, really good. And one of the ways that she suggests that you can decide to organize workspaces is by topic. So you can have a workspace for finance and a workspace for manufacturing. So that's one way to do it. Another way is to consider security and organize or group things by the types of security permissions people need. I think looking at departments is another principle that you can apply. Departments might overlap with topics, but it might not. So again, it's sort of a thing that you want to think about in terms of a matrix view. And audience, meaning who is going to want to consume content from these workspaces. Because remember, every workspace can publish an app, which is a packaged up set of content from the workspace. So it is useful to also be thinking about audience as you consider the workspace. Workspaces allow you to control access to reports and dashboards. So who has access to them, how much access they have. So you can have people in your workspace who are administrators all the way down to just viewers. So you have you have 4 levels of granularity for that. And you can use workspaces to identify data sets that you are promoting, meaning the person who worked on the data set, created the data set, is standing behind their work, or certifying, meaning the organization as a whole says, yes, this is a blessed data set, everybody can use it, we vouch for the quality of it. And workspaces allow you to distribute your content in a controlled method. So again, you can decide through the app what versions of the reports are out there in circulation, what versions of your dashboards are out there in circulation. So it's a very good way to control information. I'm going to very quickly just take you to the service so you can kind of see what a service looks like. So you should now be looking at a workspace. So I'm in the service. So notice that I'm in a browser up here at the top. I'm in a browser. I've logged in. So you access your service through your credentials, your Office 365 credentials. And now what I have down the left-hand side is a menu bar. And I've created a workspace here called PBI Crash Course. Okay. And inside that workspace, right over here on the right-hand side, I have a report that I have published. Okay, so I've got that report that I was just showing you. I published it up here. And coming with the report is the data set that goes with it. Okay, you can't separate them. They go together. Okay, I can add people or subtract people from this workspace. So for example, notice over here on the right-hand side, I'm in the Access tab right here. So this is access for my workspace. And I can add somebody either as an admin or a member or a contributor or a viewer. And those go in order of levels of permission. Okay, so again, I can control who has access to the data, what kind of access they have, and so I can get very intentional about how I am sharing data across my organization. I can create dashboards here. I don't happen to have a dashboard created right here, but I could easily create one from a model that I have. So I can just come in here and I can click on the report. And then notice if I hover, let me zoom in, if I hover over a particular visual, I can pin that visual using the pin, and it will say, okay, where would you like to take this visual and put it? And I'll put it on here. I'll put it on a new dashboard that I'm going to name. So now I will have another dashboard, another piece of content in my workspace, a dashboard that I have created. So workspaces can contain up to 5 different types of content. So reports from the desktop, data sets that go with the report, dashboards that are created from visuals in reports, and a new thing, or not a new thing, but a relatively new thing called data flows. I'm going to go back. I'm using my menu over here on the left-hand side, and I'm just going to go back into the main view of my workspace now. And what I want to do now, and see, here's my dashboard. I just added it. What I want to do is I want to decide what content is going to be in my app. Notice that over here on the right-hand side now, I have these toggle switches that say, okay, do you want me to include this in your app? And I can choose, I can select which content gets included in the app. Once I've done that, I'm going to come over. I have an app, as I said, that's already published. This is a lot like a cooking show. I click on app, and here is my app that I now have published out to the organization. Anybody can look at this. They can see things that I've included, and I have navigation over here on the left-hand side. And it's a way for me to distribute in a controlled fashion, a way for me to distribute content that I want everybody to look at. I can see when the data was updated. And I can export the app to a PowerPoint. I can subscribe to it. I can comment on it. There's a lot of integration now between Workspaces and Teams. So if you're heavily using Teams, you can leverage that as well. You definitely will want to think through what your workspace architecture will be. And that leads me to my last slide. You need to become a data culture. So you need to organize your data sources. You need to, where are they stored? Are they named clearly? Are there duplicates? You need to curate your data sources. So you need to know your data's provenance. Who created it? Where did it come from? Or you need to review its accuracy and keep it clean. You need to keep it up to date. You need to make sure that to the extent that you can, the data sources that talk about the same things are using the same naming convention, if at all possible. So all of that is part of curating your data. You need to train your staff. Okay, it's really important. You've seen today a couple of comments about data modeling and DAX, and that's just really the tip of the iceberg. Lots of people will need some help adjusting to a new way of looking at data. They have the native capacity because they've already used Excel for years and years, but they may need some help along the way. And you really do want people to take ownership over their data. So you want data stewards and you want data wranglers. So you want people who really understand the data and work with the data all the time to be very well trained and helpful. And you want to use the promote and certify features so that people know which data sets to trust in their Power BI reports.